Is there any public comment on items not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we will roll right into our action items today. The first one is brought to us by Jenny Daniel. Jenny, would you like to describe this?
Yeah, thank you. So this is the Vicarious Trauma Response Initiative. It is, we won, I say we won it because it was a really competitive grant and there was only 12 sites chosen throughout the nation. Vicarious trauma affects, you know, direct service staff, but really everybody, people that are typing, you know, doing transcribing and all of that. And so this is a contract that lasts from, I think it's October to June 2022. I'm losing my years. Anyway, and so that is, we're just asking you to approve it. If you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, could you describe for folks what this really amounts to?
Yeah, so it's not a big financial grant. It primarily pays for some of my time, and then about half of it's going to go towards training, and really it's kind of up in the air. We did sort of a fake budget right now, because what we're doing at the moment is all of the 8 participating agencies are going to do something called the VT org, Vicarious Trauma Organizations, and it's a 80 question survey that that is going to really, I say expose, but show how each organization can improve their response for their employees. So the idea being that the organizations can do something about vicarious trauma and encourage vicarious resilience, rather than putting it on the employee, you know, just go take a bubble bath or a hike or something, you know, and there is, you know, that responsibility, of course, that we want to keep ourselves healthy, but organizations have a responsibility too. And I'm really excited because 8 of our organizations have said that this is important to them. And yeah, so they went in on the application, and once we determine what the VT orgs say, then that's going to more determine what our budgets look like exactly. But a lot of it's going to be training and hopefully utilizing some local people and hopefully sending some people away, you know, on like a team training type of situation, if we can ever do that again.
What are the organizations, the 8?
The 8 are law enforcement, so PD and Sheriff's Office, the CPS, Relationship Violence Services, the YWCA, and I'm spacing First Step. Did I say 8? All Nations. Yeah, I think I got everybody.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'd love to hear how it all turns out.
Yeah.
At some point.
And congratulations on winning this super competitive grant.
Josh,
Thanks,
you're
Josh.
with us.
Oh, I've been here from the start, man. I was just.
I thought you were interviewing folks or something.
I finished right before 10 o'clock.
Oh,
Nice.
Okay. Well, welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting.
I motion that the board approve the contract with International Association of Chiefs of Police for the Vicarious Trauma Response Initiative Technical Assistance Grant.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Jenny. And we now have a new term for county to enter into our county vernacular, and that is fake budget. So,
Yes. Yeah, it was a really weird process, I have to say. So my first time doing that. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jenny. Next, we have Shane Stack. This is to approve and sign an agreement with MDT to construct a shared use path on Mullen Road between Dayshaw Lane and Pulp Mill Road. And Shane, I may have inadvertently already signed this contract. It was on my desk with a sticky note that said "sign here," which I just typically go ahead and sign those things. So anyway.
Actually, Dave, that now means I own your red truck. I just slipped it in there. Thank you.
I suppose we can shred it if you know, if you guys decide not to sign the agreement. But do you guys want the long story on this, the secondary roads program and the history on all that and how we got here, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Martin might like it.
Okay, yeah. So the secondary roads program with MDT, they actually work with the counties to determine priorities on the secondary roads program. So in the Missoula district, they would work with all the counties within in that district, and they would meet and it used to be they would meet a lot more regularly, but I think the cost of road construction has gone up so much that the projects don't happen nearly as often, and so they meet somewhat infrequently. But when they do, they get together, and each county brings their priorities for secondary roads. And at some point along the way, Missoula County had Mullen Road between Dayshaw and Pulp Mill Road as their #1 priority. And they put that on the list, and it's now risen kind of close enough to the top of the list that MDT started developing that project. Well, when the county submitted the project, and I can't give you the year, I'd have to go back and do a little bit of research, but we could figure that out. But it's been a while. I don't know that shared use paths were that in vogue at that time. And so when the county submitted this as their high priority project, they did not include the scope of inclusion of a shared use path. So when that project was just starting to be developed, the county at the time said, hey, you should include a shared use path in this project. And MDT's response was, well, when you submitted the project, you didn't have that as a scope and as part of the project, so we're not going to do that. So fast forward a few years, and Josh and I are in a discussion with MDT, and I don't know if you remember this discussion, Josh, but what we ended up agreeing to with MDT is that they would develop the project in such a way that when they bid the job, there would be an additive bid alternative. And what that means is they would have kind of a base bid and then an additional component with that bid. And that additional component would be the shared use path. And when they get those bids, they'll essentially contact the county and say, hey, that the additional cost for the additive bid alternative is going to be X amount. And if you're willing to pay that, we'll build it with the project. If you're not, then we'll just build the base road. The nice thing for the county is that MDT will develop the plans, they'll buy the right of way, and if the cost is too great for the county to afford the shared use path, then we don't have to build it. And the right of way will still be there, the plans will be available, and we could build it with future funding if we wanted to. And so basically what this agreement does is it states that MDT will let that project, if we agree to the price of the shared use path, they'll include it in the project. If we don't, they won't build it, but the plans will be available and the right of way is available. So it's a pretty good deal for the county, other than it's an expensive amenity, if you will, in the project. I think they're estimating 1.8 million. So
I really like this, and that it leaves the door open, as you pointed out, for the future, rather than no, we're not doing it, we're not buying the right of way, it's never going to happen, which makes it far more difficult for us later. So that, and for Martin's sake, this doesn't commit us to spending money tomorrow. It just leaves the door open so we can, if we can generate the funds in the future.
Yeah, thanks for the overview, Shane. I momentarily got excited that somehow MDT was agreeing to actually build the darn thing at this time. But
so, Dave and Juan, I want to point this out. I remember this meeting quite well. It was one of the last in-person meetings I had with Shane and some MDT folks, and we were sitting in a small room up like the tech conference room up here. And one of the MDT folks said, well, this just can't happen. And Shane said, I worked with y'all and I know that it can, and really, really kind of looked him in the eye and said, no, that's kind of BS. And that got us to this point of the door being open for the future. So I remember it well.
And I think the other, oh, sorry, Juan, do you want to?
A visual reference.
Yeah.
So we can look into the future where this is going to be.
Yeah, of course.
And I see Martin has his hand up too.
And while I'm bringing up a map, I guess the other thing that maybe Martin can ask his question and I'll get this map set up and then I'll finish my thoughts.
Martin, I don't see your hand up, but if you have a question, go ahead.
Juanita kind of answered it or asked my question. Pulp Mill Road sounds far away, so I'm just wondering how many miles of path this is, or along those lines.
Oh gosh, Martin, I would be totally guessing right now. If I want to say it's 5-ish, maybe.
I bet Shane could get back to you after the meeting, Martin, with a more specific answer there.
Okay, thank you.
And to be clear, Martin, this just opens the door so we could do this in the future. We're not committing any money or anything. This just means the possibility exists. And without this, the possibility would be far less plausible.
That's great. I vaguely remember you discussing this at some point in the past. So, yeah.
Everything pre-COVID is pretty hazy.
So if I zoom in, it's hard to see the entire thing, but here is the intersection with Dayshaw and Mullen Road. Mm-hmm. And so Mullen Road is secondary 263, and it would go all the way up to the intersection with Pulp Mill Road, which is right at the mill. So you wouldn't have a very long distance then to get to Frenchtown and connect to the trail system in Frenchtown. So I think it's just a kind of that next piece of trail, and we'll have to close the gap too. There's a segment of trail between Dayshaw and Cody Lane that we would eventually have to construct as well. But I think, we're in the neighborhood of about 5 years plus or minus before we'd see construction starting, and maybe the soonest we would see it happen would be 3 years, but I think it's probably closer to 5. And I think we've discussed some different funding options in the past, as far as we've got the trail bond funding. We're considering some other options as well. So it gives you 3 to 5 years to figure out funding, and if it doesn't work out, that we're not able to get the funding in time, at least the plans are there, the right-of-way's there, and we can come back at a later date and build it. So,
hey Shane, would this tie into eventually? Is the goal to bring this and tie it into the city's network of trails and kind of the Mullen Build project?
Yeah, and that's where the kind of that gap is, Martin. If you go from Dayshaw to Cody, there isn't a trail built there yet, but that can be built pretty. Well, I say easily. There's enough right of way to construct a trail there. But from Cody Lane into like the Flynn area, that would all tie into the Build Trail network.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this sounds like a good piece of work to set the stage for a future project.
And I guess one other thing too, if we do want to use the bond funds, the trail bond funding, we talked to MDT and this was just last week where we talked about having that ability to create like an open space easement inside MDT's right away, and maybe putting like a 20-year cap on it, or having some flexibility with it, so that if in the future, if they needed to move it, it would be be able to be moved easily, and then it allows us to use those trail bond funds because it would be considered open space. So those are the kind of the hurdles we got to get through over the next 5 years, but I think it just opens the door.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the more that we can flesh out a path forward that will help MDT get to yes on this, so much the better.
Dave, were you just punning there, or was that just coincidence?
It just rolled out.
No, nicely done. Well, with that, I would move that we approve and sign an agreement with MDT to construct a shared use path on Mullen between Dayshaw and Pulp Mill.
Second.
Any further discussion on this? All in favor? Aye.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks a lot, Shane.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Shane. And remarkably, I think the agreement is already signed, so it's good to go.
Okay, great.
All right. Next, we have a request for the board to approve and authorize the chair to sign a lease agreement with financial impact of $1,008.51. So who would like to describe this for us? Flanna.
Hi. So I have before you today a lease agreement with RE Investment Company, which is Bobcat of Missoula. And so the lease agreement would be for 48 months, as you said, and the financial impact is $1,008.51. So the monthly payment is accounted for within the fairgrounds budget. And the lease agreement is for a toolcat to be operated at the fairgrounds. It's a piece of equipment that we use year round. We own some attachments for it. So it's used, we have a snow plow and then like a snow brush to clean off the trails and sidewalks. And then it's used in the summer as a mower. And then there's also a forklift attachment to move panels and barriers around the fairgrounds for various events. We worked with Dave Wall for procurement of the lease, and it's a continuation of a lease that's about to expire that Chris Lounsbury set up for us. And I think we went with the lease initially because it's just a better system for us to have a monthly payment as opposed to buying this equipment outright would be around $60,000.
So for
So what
20
happens
bucks
if
a
you-
month, we're gonna get a lot.
So,
Jeez.
Anna,
Wow.
I'm just in awe of this. I've rented such machines for like $600 for 2 days.
Yeah.
So how is it we got $1,000 for a year? Way to go, Flana.
And Dave Wall, and Chris Lounsbury.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
Yeah. I don't understand, but good work.
Is this a new piece of equipment, or is it a junker, or what is it?
No, so we leased a toolcat 4 years ago, and the grounds team took really good care of it. So we're returning it, and they're going to give us a new 2021 Bobcat.
For
And
a
then just
grand a year?
for a grand a month.
A
A grand a month.
Oh, okay. There
a
you go.
month lease, yes.
There now I'm less.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
No.
I thought
Yeah,
it was
the way the RTA reads is that the $1,008 covers 48 months, which
Yeah.
would be a
Sorry.
steal of a deal.
I was in awe. Like,
yes.
Now we're
Yeah.
less in awe.
Yeah.
Less than
Yeah,
I'll take
sorry,
it.
I
It
will.
wasn't a good job.
I will say the reason we started this was the buyback program that Flana's describing, because Monty, we have a licensed mechanic on staff at the fairgrounds. Monty's actually a licensed mechanic. He's able to maintain it, and so similar to the program that we use at Public Works, where some of the equipment we lease and then are able to basically trade back and get credit towards the next lease, keeps the payment lower than it would be if we bought this and then kind of had to go through the depreciation cycle, because this is used literally every day, pretty much year round. At the fairgrounds in some capacity. So it's a pretty heavily utilized piece of equipment, not just for the fair, but as Lana said, in the winter for snow removal and then day to day with the events that happen at the fairgrounds. So,
Right. And even at $1,000 a month for 48 months, that's a lot less than the 60 grand it would take to buy a new one. So you
it is,
still,
especially
I
with
take
that
that
trade
back.
back.
You still get your good job, Flana.
Oh, thanks.
I motion that the board approve and chair sign the lease agreement.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? And let the record note that it's per month, not
Yeah,
that
please.
amount for 48 months entirely. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Flana.
Thank you.
Okay, so ends our action items. Correspondence. We've got a few items today. We'll begin with a Smurfit Stone letter. Anyone want to speak to this?
Yeah, we all missed the meeting yesterday.
Travis.
Oh, I was at that meeting.
Oh,
I
good.
was a part of it too.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so.
Then I missed the meeting.
Oh, maybe that's better.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So, yes, we have the human health and ecological risk assessments out for operable units 2 and 3, which is the majority of the site, including the industrial core and the sludge ponds, landfills, floodplain, really the bulk of the risk there. So this is the second iteration of these risk assessment documents, and how those fit into the Superfund process. And Josh and Dave, you've heard all of that, but just to catch up one, those have to be completed before the remedial investigation is finalized, and you can move on to discussing the feasibility studies and what options for remedy are. So it's kind of a critical point where these risk assessments will define what the actual risk on the ground are to ecological receptors and to humans. So the Water Quality District is preparing some detailed comments and have worked with the Clark Fork Coalition to enlist the assistance of a consulting firm to help with some of the specifics on that as well. But there remain just some overarching problems with the site, and those are identified in this this letter before you. One risk that still has not been addressed despite repeated correspondence is the risk of channel movement, the Clark Fork reoccupying the site, which it did in 1955 prior to berms being constructed. We're also seeing that some risk maybe or are muted because of the sampling design, doing a grid-based sampling where you composite the samples and try to quantify the risk by taking those grid-based samplings. And then the other thing is that the dumps have not been thoroughly investigated still. The site needs what's called a conceptual site model, which documents how contamination moved through the system, and there are different components to that. There's a broad site-based or conceptual site model that talks about, or we feel it should discuss air deposition of contaminants. And then there's a groundwater specific conceptual site model, and that would talk about how contaminants would move through landfills and sludge ponds through groundwater. We feel like it's really important to have those down before you develop the risk assessments. And also a fourth point that's included in the letter before you is regarding the fish sampling, and there was data collected in 2018 that was not included in the risk assessments, and that this is really technical data and how and where fish are collected and analyzed to determine the concentrations of PCBs and dioxin in that fish tissue, and we still feel that it's not adequately assessed to represent the risk. So those are the four kind of overarching comments that we see. We've got, I think we're up to 9 pages of specifics on those, and the natural resource damage program, the tribes, CFC, the CAG, others are preparing comments as well. So those are due this Friday, tomorrow by 5 p.m. So
okay, thanks, Travis. Any questions?
Well, Travis, I really appreciate you and your staff putting all the time and dedication into getting all the technical details right, and that we could send this type of meaningful letter. And at the same time, there's sort of a cynical voice. Maybe this is because I was speaking at the legislature yesterday, that feels concerned that we're taking our very best efforts and screaming those details into a void. And if we're not heard, are there other options besides more letter writing and commentary?
We've been repeating ourselves for 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll just throw this out there, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Travis. We were, in years past, relatively successful in elevating this up the food chain of the EPA, and if at some point, I don't know who, I don't know how the chairs got shifted around on the deck, so to speak, with the change of administrations in January, but might that also be an option in terms of addressing Josh's comment?
I mean, I do like squawking into the void as much as the next person. You know, if we could be effectual, let's go that route.
Yeah, agreed. It feels like we're in a position where we're asking for more data that's going to take it will take longer to collect that data. The more data you request, the longer it takes to finalize those risk assessments. So, you know, there's some discomfort there, and asking for more data because we know it's going to take longer. But I frankly, I don't know of those other tools at this point. These risk assessments have to be completed to get to the remedial investigation. It's a stepwise process. So EPA does respond to these comments. So we'll get an answer back to each thing we portray. You know, if we're not happy with those answers, then we can talk about those other options. You know, it could go higher. This letter is copied to the Region 8 Deputy Administrator. That used to be Benevento, and we did have some success there. And so, you know, we're hoping it doesn't go into the void, but
so is it, I don't have the letter right in front of me now. Is the letter copied to our congressional delegation?
Yeah.
it is.
Okay.
To
Well,
the congressional delegation, to the governor, and to the Region 8 Deputy Administrator.
Oh, Deb.
Okay.
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 And Travis, I just want to reiterate how important this is. That the future cleanup is going to be based on what the risks actually are. It's super important that we get these details right, even if it takes longer, because then we'll get the cleanup that actually gets things cleaned up. If we work off of inaccurate data, we'll get an incomplete cleanup. So the delay would actually be worth it.
Yes, that's my sense here, is that this is a necessary step, and it needs to be done right. And the site is complicated enough, and it's discharged so much over so many years that it's, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult to assess the risk and to feel confident that those risks are assessed in such a way that they're going to lead to cleanup. And so yeah, I find it unfathomable that that this type of industry can leave this type of footprint with there not being a risk to human health and ecological receptors. So
yeah, I couldn't agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's always troubled me that the can just oftentimes gets kicked down the road, as far as we'll deal with that at the subsequent phase of the process. And if we've not adequately identified the risks at this stage, are we really going to be able to figure out the appropriate mitigations at a later stage in the process?
I also want to reiterate, Travis, the drama of those maps you showed of river migration patterns and where the Clark Fork was in the 70s and where it is now, which, I mean, that really wasn't that long ago in the life of a river, or in geological time. It's like 10 seconds, right? So it's super easy to look at those maps and imagine the river being in yet another place that could cause real damage given what's at that site. And it does seem to me a huge blank spot that the EPA is not considering that.
Well, thanks for your work, Travis.
Yeah.
And we'll get this
interest.
circulated via DocuSign to sign. Thanks.
Thank
Our
you.
next letter is supporting the development of impact fees for the Swatuppcane area. Who wants to speak to this? Shane?
Yeah, that's me, Dave. If you recall, we met last week with Jeremy Keene at the city, and he did a great presentation on the proposed impact fees that the city has. So you'd requested that we draft a letter, and so this is that letter of support for those impact fees.
So can I throw some? I know I just can't help myself. I just want to throw this out on, because I know that there is criticism around impact fees saying, oh my goodness, this is going to drive the cost of housing up. I want to be really clear that if were it not for that $13 million of public money, the development at the Setupkane area would also cover the costs of the entirety of the infrastructure, the sewer, water, roads, et cetera, which would have the cost of housing be far higher than those same houses would be if we support the construction of that infrastructure with that build grant and then tack on an impact fee. So we are still money ahead in terms of affordable housing because of the build grant. And these impact fees help lessen the property tax burden on all of us who would help cover the cost of bringing services out to these new houses. So I personally am really strongly in support of this.
I get the impression that you're supportive, Josh.
Yeah, I'm
Okay. I'm glad I got
sign
that straight.
immediately. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That will be circulated via DocuSign also. Thanks, Shane.
Thanks.
And next, we have a letter to Representative Rosendale urging support for direct federal aid to counties. Is this you, Chris?
It is. It's myself and Allison, I think, and Andrew's on here too, I believe, as well. So this is the letter to Representative Rosendale, since these bills are starting off in the U.S. House of Representatives, encouraging him to support some of the proposed legislation related to direct federal aid. And again, as drafted right now, that federal aid would be passed through from the state to counties based on a population formula or the CDBG formula if you're a CDGB entitlement community. So that matches more closely what Missoula County is looking for. So this is, again, just encouraging him to support that legislation. And assuming that it moves from the House to the Senate, you would see in the future a similar bill or similar letter to our delegates in the Senate. But this is, since it's starting in the House, that's where we are today.
Great. I look forward to signing that.
Thanks.
And thanks, as always, to Andrew for pulling together the numbers and Allison for putting together an excellent letter. So.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Allison.
You're welcome.
You bet. Okay, moving into a few discussion items here. The first is the city's affordable housing trust, and I think the point that we need to discuss today is, if I'm not mistaken, who among the three of us would like to serve on the interview committee with the city council.
That is correct.
I was under the impression Josh was going to be.
Oh, that was subtle, Juanita.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it
Okay.
seems like sense to me because you've been working on this. So
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Josh.
That was speedy. I expected long debate. Oh, boom, Josh, done. All right, love it.
Yeah,
The legislature, we have a couple of bills today. Thanks, commissioners, for your time on this, as always. So two bills that we wanted to draw your attention to that are new bills that are out. So the first is HB 419 that we're going to recommend you support. This bill comes out of Libby and would allow the creation of a local government Superfund Oversight Committee for designated Superfund sites. And while SMRFIT, as you know, is and I think Travis unfortunately has dropped off the line, is not a full Superfund site. That is one of the potential outcomes that could come should there be changes related to what's found at that site. But this would actually allow local governments to create a Superfund oversight committee that would work in conjunction with the state on Superfund sites. And that is the model that's being used in Libby for the Superfund site in Libby. And so we would recommend you probably, or that the county support this. Given again, it adds that ability for some local control and direct input into the Superfund site process that doesn't currently exist in state law. It's normally the state talking directly to the feds, and this would actually have local government be part of at that table, which seems like a good idea. These are obviously happening in local communities. So.
I guess I naively didn't realize that our local governments were not at the table.
Yeah, you can be invited to the table, but you don't necessarily get a direct voice. It's normally the state that fed directly without any kind of local input. And so this does, like I said, creates a local committee, which I think would be good, where local government can have that direct voice. And then the second bill today that we wanted to talk to you about, unfortunately, is a bill that's kind of a bummer. I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid off, Josh. I'm sorry. It's HB 464, repeal local option gas taxes. What's interesting about, sorry, Josh. What's interesting about this bill is, of course, there have been several bills related to infrastructure during the hearings of those on multiple occasions. The fact that only one community has enacted a local option fuel excise tax, that being Missoula. And if local governments desperately need this money for infrastructure, why are they not imposing that? And at the same time, now the sponsor of this bill, who has been one of the people who has asked that particular question, is now the sponsor to repeal that, even though only one community has done it. So obviously, we're recommending that we oppose that bill, as Missoula is the one that has that.
Who's the sponsor of this?
That would be Matt Regier, as opposed to the other Regier in the legislature.
Yeah, that's just outrageous.
Yes, and as you'll recall, this bill actually does generate more dollars than the state's increased gas tax, which we call BARSA, because of the fact that that fund is split across the entire state. And this directly, of course, impacts people who are local, using our infrastructure, and the tourists who come here. So it is actually a direct way that we help subsidize reduced property taxes by having everyone contribute to that pot of money. So
all I can say is the level of hypocrisy with our state legislature is breathtaking. And the one moment that they are trying to get the federal government off of the state's back, they are stripping local government at its very most grassroots level from any ability to determine its own destiny.
Well, between that and the sheer hypocrisy of the fact that they continue to ask the question both last session and this session, why more communities are not doing this so that they could actually benefit from it, and then turning around and proposing removing it. So it's either you want us to do it and you're unhappy that we haven't, or you don't want us to do it. But it's really hard to have it both ways.
Chris, I really appreciate you saying that. I want to put an exclamation mark on this for Martin. They asked us to do this. Right? If you want more revenue, go do this. And then our ask was approved by our voters, which is another thing the folks in the legislature really want, is to have citizens be more attached to tax policy. This is the second time in less than 24 hours where we're running into a Missoula-specific potential state law. It's maddening, and I'm going to try not to have a tantrum here on camera, but I'll just sit quietly.
So Chris, I feel your pain, Josh. I really do.
Chris,
and
what do you know from Rebecca or others in terms of who is pushing back against this?
So we just reached out to Rebecca. This just popped up today. It was actually sent to me by Mako. It formally got a bill number this morning. So it's not yet. I don't yet know when it's going to be heard. So I immediately reached out to Rebecca and sent this to her and asked her to get us some information. I unfortunately don't have that yet, but I'll have it for you. I would recommend that if at all possible, we consider both a commissioner testifying against this and potentially reaching out to some of our partners who in the business community who are supportive of this because of the need for local infrastructure, and ask them to consider reaching out to their associations and also testifying in opposition to this. I don't often ask us to go back out to those members of the community who have done good work on our behalf, but I really feel like it's going to be necessary to get some of them to stand up and say, we looked at this, and from a sheer infrastructure standpoint, this is one of the only tools that's out there, and it is the most fair tool because it impacts not only the everyday user, myself, who drives the roads of Missoula County, but also the folks who come to our community and benefit from the many recreational opportunities that our roads and infrastructure lead to.
Well, and here's the deal. We are and have been trying to get the word out to folks that Missoula County will be applying for federal land access program grant funding, which requires a local match. And we are the several $100,000 a year that we're bringing in via gas tax was meant to be that local match to allow us to do projects in the hinterlands of Missoula County that would not get done otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and I think, Josh, I think you would be the perfect spokesperson for this in light of your rave reviews from your performance yesterday before the
Yeah, man, I'll try more squawking into the void. I don't know. I'm happy to do it, but I wonder if a different messenger may carry more weight at this point. But I'm happy to. The text is squarely in my brain. I could do it at the drop of a hat. But this is just so disheartening. I can't express that powerfully enough. And I'm sure that Mr. Longcake and the petroleum vendors are behind this, and damn, it's just super disheartening.
Yeah. So again, if I would recommend, commissioners, since all of you had contact with folks during this, that if there's anybody that were any of the organizations that were partners with us in bringing this to the voters that would be willing, having them testify on this bill will be helpful, as I'm sure it will be seen as local government being bad. Right?
Well, there was a group, a friends group called For Our Roads.
Yeah.
And I can certainly reach out to those folks. And in addition to this fairness around infrastructure that you brought up, Chris, it also has a property tax relief element to it. I mean, this is money that we didn't expand our road budget this year, if I remember correctly, in part because we had access to this new revenue that came not just from the folks who live in Missoula County, but from our 1.5 million guests that previously did not contribute.
Yeah. And I don't know about anyone else, but since this passed, since the voters approved this, I have not heard a single person complain about needing to drive to Mineral County or Ravalli County to gas up their vehicle because of this 2 cents.
I had heard that we could be looking at potentially convenience stores on the south end of Lolo going out of business because people were going to drive to Florence for their gas, and then once there, they would buy their jerky and beer and cigarettes and drive those businesses out because they were close to the discount that could be achieved by crossing the county line. And as far as I can tell from driving there recently, those stores are still thriving.
Yeah. I think it would also be worth reaching out. As you know, Commissioner, we have Mako's call tomorrow. I think it would be worth potentially also reaching out to Gallatin County, which is exploring putting this on the ballot, and others, and seeing if we can get other counties which are considering this option to also be in opposition. So if you have relationships with either Representative Brown in Gallatin County or Commissioner Brown, not representative anymore, Commissioner Brown, or one of the other commissioners in Gallatin County, it might be worth reaching
out. We can split the chores here. I'll squawk into the void that is the legislature, and Dave or one of you guys talks to Gallatin and the other one speaks to Mako. We could.
Yeah, I'd be happy to reach out to Gallatin. One of their commissioners is on the Rail Authority Board of Directors. So
great.
And I'm happy to bring it up. I'm happy to bring it up during Mako's. I just don't know that, as you know, the commissioners prefer to talk to commissioners, not necessarily your staff on the Mako calls. But I'm happy.
Well, I've heard you've made good inroads there.
Exactly. Yeah. No, Chris, if you bring it up on Friday, that's great. And then, well, Dave, I'm sorry, I'm spacing the commissioner's name. In Gallatin. Hart? No,
it's Scott McFarland. Scott McFarland.
Thank you.
Juan, who is there someone at Mako that you feel like you could talk to?
No.
Well, is Mako going to be in opposition? Do you know?
Yeah.
I don't know yet. Eric sent this to me, so I reached back out to him and asked for what Mako's position will be. I don't know that they will have a specific position. I imagine he'll be asking the membership and the leadership of the organization on Friday and Monday, respectively, when they meet.
Yeah, their executive committee is empowered to make decisions like this. So
right, and that will be on Monday.
But
What'd you say, Juan?
I could reach out to Jason Strauss.
That would be great.
I mean, it's just the focus on alleviating property tax pressure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the message is, we don't care if Custer County does this or not. We just want the ability to do it.
And then ultimately, it's up to the voters. So if voters don't like it, they don't have to vote for it.
And I think, I mean, I truly, in my opinion, that is one of the key pieces for the legislature, is recognizing that this is not something that just local government can do on its own. This requires an act of the voter.
Voters
Make a decision. And surely they are the ones who best know whether, this is something that they would support. That's kind of the whole point. So.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the number once again, Chris? Sorry.
This is HB 464.
So Chris, I'm just saying this out loud to all of our staff here. Can someone help and set me up for testifying when this comes before a committee?
Yeah, as soon as it gets scheduled and we get in that window of you can't register more than 3 days in advance and no less than 24, we will get you registered.
And then what do we need to make sure we craft a letter?
We can craft a separate letter if you want a letter for the committee as well as the message that we'll send.
Let's do both. Yeah.
Yep, we can do that.
Yep.
Yeah, so we've got Allison and myself and Ann and Sarah and Emmy and Ann and Jamar all on here, so and Casey, so we can get it together.
Great.
Self-determination. So, okay.
It only
Thanks.
comes from Helena.
Anything? What else, Chris? Anything else legislative?
Luckily, just those two. And Josh, I'm sorry that you had such a frustrating experience yesterday with Senate Bill 211. That is frustrating. It's always interesting that the legislature is very in favor of local control, but only in certain areas.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, that's that was made loud and clear to me yesterday.
Oh, thanks for doing that, Josh.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't know that I did a very good job.
I am sure that you did a very good job. Whether they will listen is always but hopefully it will change some minds.
All right. Anything regarding upcoming meetings that we need to discuss?
Oh, was there a correspondence that we got regarding Sea Lake Fire Department? Were we supposed to?
You just got a letter back from Board Chair Kennedy, kind of. I'll just generally summarize it as their response to the concerns that you passed on, which is that as a local fire board, they're listening to their members. It's hard to get volunteers and
Funding. Okay.
Yeah, and funding. So.
COVID?
I see Adrian is with us. I'm not sure if that's why. So.
Yeah, that is why, and I hope to not get you as fired up as as the legislature. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to make myself available. If you had any specific questions, I'll give you kind of a brief overview of non-congregate shelter activities as well as some vaccination coordination efforts to date.
Yeah.
So to date, we have served 230 unique individuals with non-congregate shelter since March of 2020. Can't believe we're coming on a year of that. 4 people have successfully transitioned into permanent housing out of the what we typically refer to as that tier 3 population. So these are people who are over 65, who have underlying conditions as defined by the CDC and as eligible through FEMA to access non-congregate shelter. So that's really awesome. And that would not be possible if it weren't for Alice Healy, who is a social worker that the health department brought on with some CBDG funding, because the wraparound services such as case management and those kinds of things are ineligible for FEMA funding. And so it was really awesome to be collaborative with the health department, knowing that was going to be a need and finding that funding through the city to bring that position on, and obviously has been very beneficial and very valuable to that effort. So I just want to acknowledge that. Vaccination coordination continues to go very well. We have a weekly provider meeting where all of the registered providers in Missoula County kind of get together around a screen and talk about their plans, talk about their capacity. Some recent developments that are really good is that DPHHS at the state, who had been doing and kind of collating all of the vaccine order requests from each of these providers, and then sitting around a table, and determining kind of who got what. They have changed that process as of this week and have gone to a single point of contact at each jurisdictional level, so for each county, to do that resource ordering for vaccine supply. What that does is that allows us to just be even more coordinated in who's going to get vaccine based on our what we know our allocation is, which still kind of fluctuates right around that 1,500 new first doses per week, and we can really be very strategic in putting that to providers that are ready and able to administer that vaccine in a very quick fashion. For example, as we've gone since December with vaccine administration, that second shot and that second dose has to be kind of accounted for when we think about the capacity of a provider. So if we do an 800 mass clinic for 800 folks, in 3 weeks, we have to do that same clinic for their second shot, or in 28 days, depending on what vaccine we're talking about. And so that has to be kind of accounted for and kind of plugged into the system so that we have this, if you think of kind of a yo-yo effect of, we push a bunch of vaccine to one provider so that they can do a mass clinic. And then in 3 weeks, we need to have another first dose clinic that we can push vaccine to so that that first clinic can do their second doses, and so that we don't have any gaps or slowdown of first shot administration, if that makes any sense at all.
Adrian, so how does this work? If we're getting on average 1,500 doses a week, are some of those being skimmed off for second doses later, or is
No.
there more coming in beyond that 15 that is specified for second doses?
So when we talk about 1,500 first doses coming in, that is followed by 1,500 second doses at a later date.
Okay.
And so what we have to kind of try to plan for and anticipate are when those second doses start arriving, what does that do to that provider's capacity to continue administering first doses? And so we're very fortunate in Missoula County. Not only do we have just tremendous cooperation from all the providers, but we have a lot of capacity as well. We currently have 27 providers registered. Now, when you think about a registered provider, a lot of them are, some of them are private pharmacies, some of them are smaller medical clinics, and may only have the capacity to do 100 shots a day or 100 shots a week. And that's okay. Part of what our tasking is with this vaccination coordination effort is to understand what those capacities are so that we can kind of allocate appropriately, so that we don't have, obviously our biggest goal is to not have vaccine sitting in a freezer because we can't get it out.
Thanks.
So you'll start hearing, as of today, some radio commercials, some PSAs that the JIC and our public information officers have been working on, as well as some kind of evergreen type advertising in local papers, and some direct mailings that are also going out. Outreach continues with the hard to reach population and the agencies that serve those folks, and that's been going really well. Right now, our kind of overall strategy is to really kind of continually support 2 methods of vaccine kind of availability, and I'll call them focused and open. And the focused vaccine administration is really through kind of those healthcare providers that have electronic healthcare records where they can identify their patients based on not only age, but any of the additional kind of underlying conditions that put those patients at highest risk so that they can focus their efforts on those most at risk in our community. And so we always want to keep those options kind of flush with vaccines so that they can continue that effort and continue to outreach to those most at risk, but then also having open opportunities, which are through the Missoula City County Health Department and thus far with the University of Montana School of Pharmacy in doing these kind of open public clinics where we make appointments available, for lack of a better word, kind of on the open market, right? So we have our call center that's staffed with folks that can assist folks in registering for those appointments, as well as an online portal for folks to access those appointments. And so our goal is to always kind of have both of those options open at the same time and operating at the same time.
And it's going great right now. We just really don't continue to not have enough vaccine.
Right. Yep. I mean, certainly right now the supply is not meeting the demand. It will get better. We're looking at next week. We'll hopefully hear some good news on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which will just bring another option into the community.
Thanks, Adrian. I just want to say all this. The good news piece of this, I think, really stems from Adrian and her folks taking the leadership role in coordinating what is otherwise a very decentralized effort across our county. So thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, you bet. It's, it certainly is complex, but it's also a lot of fun to kind of try to figure all this stuff out and getting to work with the incident management team. There's a lot of synergy that comes out of there and a lot of good work going on.
So I do want to just throw one thing out just as a clarifying piece for Adrian. Adrian, can you remind me, Johnson & Johnson will be the 1 dose vaccination, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Johnson
So
& Johnson
that
is
will,
a
of
single
course,
shot.
Also make it a little easier to deploy because you'll get rid of that yo-yo piece, as Adrian was talking about, of having 3 weeks or 4 weeks later having to have the exact same clinic with the exact same folks.
Right.
I think I see Martin's hand up.
Yeah, Martin, do you have a question?
Yeah, Adrian, real quick, do the patients, do they know what vaccine they're getting when they receive it, like what brand or manufacturer?
Yes, they do.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that question, Martin. Well, thanks, Adrian, and please pass on to your team and the incident management team our thanks and appreciation. And at some point, I believe, are we going to have a chance to take a little deeper dive into the mechanics of what the team is doing?
You bet. And, I see that we're kind of out of time today, but I'd be happy to do that next week by way of kind of lining out the leader's intent and how that leader's intent kind of then drives the objectives, and the objectives then translate into tactics that we continually check in on those objectives to make sure that we're meeting them, and be happy to take a deeper dive into that next week.
Great, thanks. Any other last words from folks?
I think Martin has one more.
Martin, is your hand still up from previously? Yeah, I think so.
Sorry.
Sorry, guys.
Hey, I have just one question real quick. Sorry, this is Allison for Adrian. Just when we decide to have that discussion, can you let me know? Because I think that would be helpful for media as well.
You bet. I don't have my calendar up, but let's just plan on next Thursday.
Okay, thank you.
And would that be, Adrian, would that be during admin? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking I'd just do it during admin, and we can put it as a specific discussion item if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do that so we make sure to reserve adequate time for the discussion. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone.
Goodbye.